Namaskar and welcome back. Today I'm sharing a discourse from our Guru Sri Sri Anandamurti on the topic of what is the soul? Do you actually have a soul? If so, what is it? So let's get into it. This discourse is taken from a series called Ananda Vachanamritam. It's part 2, and the discourse is called Mind and Cognitive Faculty. What is Jivatma, the individual soul? Jivatma is the reflection of the Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, on the unit mental plate. Actually, Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, is the Atma. And Jivatma, the individual soul, is the reflected Atma. Suppose there are so many mirrors, or looking glasses, and there is one face, or there is one flower, a red flower. That one flower or one face, after being reflected in all those mirrors, becomes so many flowers or faces. And, according to the purity of the mirror, the quality of the reflection will be there. All the reflections won't be the same. It depends on the purity of the mirror. One face becomes so many faces. Similarly, the supreme entity, the cognitive faculty, is the same one face, one flower. And there are so many reflections of that one face on so many mental mirrors. For each and every entity, for each and every living being, there is mind. Somewhere undeveloped, somewhere developed, somewhere superdeveloped. But mind is there wherever there is life, and reflection is there. So, wherever there is mind, there is Jivatma, individual soul, also. This reflected Atma is Jivatma. And the original Atma, the original thing that has been reflected, is called Pratyagatma. The reflected portion is called Jivatma, and the original entity, whose reflections they are, is called Pratyagatma. Now, Pratyagatma is the Paramatma, the Supreme Soul. Jivatma is not the Paramatma. It is simply a reflection. Now, when the mirrors are taken away, the original face remains as it was, without any reflection. Similarly, when the minds are taken away, all the minds are taken away, that supreme Pratyagatma remains as a singular entity, and there is no Jivatma. That is, it remains unreflected. There are 4 stages of mind: waking, dreaming, sleeping, and turiya, which means oneness with God. Now, in turiya stage, what does happen? The conscious mind is suspended due to strong concentration. That is, the conscious mind gets one-pointed and merges with the subconscious. And again, the subconscious gets pointed and merges with the unconscious. And that unconscious, functioning without the help of nerve fibers or nerve cells, merges with the cosmic entity, the cognitive faculty, through meditation. There remains no mind, no functioning mind. That is, all the 3 stages of mind get suspended in cognitive faculty. And that stage is called Turiya, or Kevala. Kevala means all. Only one entity remains. That is, Paramatma remains. That is why it is called Kevala Siddhi. Waking, dream, and sleep, these are the expressed forms of mind, and Turiya is the final withdrawal of mind. These four forms come from whom? They come from the macrocosmic entity, the supreme entity, because they are the reflection of the supreme entity. That supreme consciousness, whose reflections are waking, dreaming, and sleeping, is the pure I, is your actual I. The mind receiving these reflections, and the Atman, which is the reflection of the supreme entity, is not your actual I. Your actual I is that supreme entity whose reflections these Atmans are. That is your actual I. And while you are closely associated with the pains and pleasures concerning these bodies, you won't feel the pleasure of being the supreme I. And when you will be able to dissociate yourself from the pains and pleasures in connection with these small I's, then it will be the final stage of your spiritual practice. It is the supreme stance. It is the samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi. And when the spiritual aspirant will realize that the supreme entity is his actual I, then he will find himself freed from all bondages of the world. So what we think of as our self, our soul, is the reflection of the supreme self, the supreme soul, on our unit mental plate. So what is meant by unit mental plate? It is like the mind is likened to a mirror, like a mental plate, a mental mirror. And what we feel as our self, our soul, is merely the reflection of the supreme consciousness on that mirror. And our goal is to get back to that original, to realize that supreme consciousness as our true self. And to do that, we have to remove the mirrors, so that there's no mirrors left and only that supreme self remains. And that's what we're trying to do in spiritual practice. And what is that process, right? That stage where there are no mirrors left, where there is only that oneness, that supreme consciousness, it's called Turiya. How do we get to that stage? So here it says, now in Turiya stage, what does happen? The conscious mind is suspended due to strong concentration. The conscious mind gets one-pointed and merges with the subconscious. And again, the subconscious gets pointed and merges with the unconscious. And finally, the unconscious merges with the cosmic entity. So that is the process of meditation. The mind, which is normally going outwards, is turned inwards. The mind has different stages: the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious, and finally Atman, and finally behind that, Paramatma, the Supreme Self. So as the mind is turned inwards, each stage collapses back into the previous stage. It's like a telescope which has different sections and opens out. Now we turn back, instead of looking outwards, we look back at the original eye behind the telescope, and each layer collapses into the next one until finally only that original eye remains. So that's the process. The Supreme Consciousness, whose reflections are the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states, is your actual I, right? And all those different states, waking, dreaming, sleeping, are not your actual I. They are just reflections of that Supreme Consciousness. How do we realize this? How do we experience our actual I? And it says, while you are closely associated with the pains and pleasures concerning these bodies, means the waking, dreaming, sleeping, etc., you won't feel the pleasure of being the Supreme I. And when you will be able to dissociate yourself from the pains and pleasures in connection with these small I's, then it will be the final stage of your spiritual practice. So the process to realize the actual I is to disidentify, to stop identifying with all your small I's. And that's how we normally, we normally don't question that. I am, we identify with our body, we identify with our gender, nationality, certain personal qualities, we identify with all our past history, who I am. But in order to realize our actual I, we have to disidentify. We have to stop identifying with all those aspects of ourself. We have to contemplate the idea that all these aspects are not. I am not all these aspects of mind. One thing that I find helpful in my meditation, I just say to myself, I am not a person, right? It's so normal to think of yourself as a person, but to realize your actual I, you have to stop identifying with being a person. You have to realize that you are a state, not a person. You are a state of consciousness, that omnipresent supreme consciousness. That is your actual I. And the way to realize it, is very clearly stated here, is to disidentify, to dissociate, to detach from that identity of being a person. Another thing that I find helpful in meditation, I use this in meditation classes. I take people through a certain process, which is a little bit related to what we call the shuddhis in Ananda Marga meditation. So I ask people to repeat to themselves and imagine no universe, just love. No body, just love. No history, just love. Right? So we identify with the universe, the aspects of our identity which are out there in the world, nationality, gender, and job, and role, and things like that. Imagine none of that. So there goes all your identity. Imagine no body. There goes all the identity associated with that. And in place of that, only love, only supreme consciousness, only God, right? Imagine no history, right? Let go of all your history. What makes you in your own mind a good person or a bad person? Imagine no history, nothing, gone. And what's left is just that beingness, that divine, right? So try these processes in your meditation to step back and no longer, and not identify with being a person. And when the spiritual aspirant will realize that the supreme entity is his actual I, then he will find himself freed from all bondages of the world. I hope you found that inspiring and useful. It's been in my mind a lot in the last month or so, and I find it coming up, this idea in my meditation that, I am not a person, that everything that I normally think of myself, even my soul, is just a reflection of that cosmic consciousness, that divine consciousness. Namaskar. Take care. See you next time.